Mobs of people in Barcelona spritz tourists with brightly colored water pistols, telling them to go home. What is going on in Barcelona where locals are so enraged at these bewildered tourists? Welcome back to Ari Wanders. My name is Ari, and this is a channel where we are wandering through the world one idea at a time. Make sure to subscribe to never miss out on an adventure. Anyone else, when they hear the word Barcelona or Barcelona, immediately hear the intro to George Ezra's song, or maybe Ed Sheeran's song? Let's have a contest in the comments. Tell me which one comes to your mind first. And then move on to the current chaos that is tourism in Barcelona. In this channel, we talk about travel, culture, and tourism, and with that, we're also going to be covering over-tourism, which Barcelona citizens have begun to protest in mass. Nearly 3,000 anti-tourism protesters marched through Barcelona in early July with signs saying things like, "Tourists go home" and "Barcelona's not for sale." They used colorful water pistols to spray tourists at local restaurants and cafes, telling them to go home. Now you might be wondering, like I am myself, why? This doesn't quite seem like the lovely land of tapas and Gaudi that I had imagined. And if you were thinking of a trip to Spain in the near future, you might be a little bit more hesitant now. In which case, the protests are totally working. But why? Why the protests and why the assault on these lovely tourist lunches? Well, first and foremost are economic concerns. Inflation and housing costs are soaring worldwide in the wake of the pandemic, but in some places it is more extreme than others, especially places with heavy tourism. Rent prices in Barcelona have increased 18% just in the last year, which follows the trend of the last decade where rent has risen nearly 68%. And the cost of buying a house has gone up by 38%. This has made the city unlivable for many locals, especially the younger generation, who are usually the ones called in to work a lot of these jobs in the tourism industry. The majority of the jobs that come in with the tourist industry are things like waiting tables, running tours, and working in hostels and hotels. These jobs are not necessarily high-paying and tend to fluctuate a lot throughout the year. So locals who are working in this industry are not necessarily able to live where they work, which is just not a good situation.
Restoration and hotels is the group that makes really big money, but all the people are in a very poor situation and they don't have enough money to live. That's a problem.
And housing for tourists has only exacerbated this issue. Many apartments are being scooped up for temporary rental purposes. Sites like Airbnb have made this business opportunity more and more tempting and has encouraged people to buy up housing to convert it into short-term rentals aimed at the tourist market. And now nearly 42% of homes in Barcelona's historic center are Airbnbs.
The last years, the city has turned completely for tourists, and what we want is a city for citizens and not in service of tourists.
Barcelona is working to reclaim the city for local residents. Barcelona's mayor announced on June 21st that nearly 10,000 tourist rentals will be banned by the year 2028. And the city has passed a freeze on the issuance of new Airbnb licenses. And after November 2028, the city will not be renewing any tourist rental licenses. If this goes ahead, by 2029, there might not be any Airbnbs in Barcelona at all. And this is not the first place where severe limitations and cutbacks have been imposed not only on tourist rentals, but at Airbnb specifically. It'll be interesting to see how this affects the Airbnb business model, and especially cities and areas affected by over-tourism handle these short-term rentals. Protesters are also concerned about Barcelona's tourism-based economy, which they fear is making them poorer and more reliant on visitors. Tourism counts for about 12% of the country's GDP, and if the visitors go, like they did so recently due to the pandemic, so does the economy. Tourism has been a point of contention and concern for a while now in Spain. Spain's Palma de Mallorca and Malaga saw anti-tourism protests in May and June, respectively. Mallorca is looking at limiting cruise ships, rental cars, and the size of group tours. And Barcelona is also looking at limiting the number of cruise ships that can dock in the city. Over-tourism is not just an affliction on Barcelona at all, but it is affecting many, many popular places in Spain and the world over. Can you think of any other tourism hotspots around the world that might be experiencing over-tourism? Or have you heard about protests against tourism in other areas? Be sure to mention these places and protests in the comments below. Let me know if you'd like more videos breaking down over-tourism in other specific places. Now, even though the water pistols were aimed at these particular tourists who probably just picked the wrong restaurant or cafe to dine at that day, they do appear to be rather harmless. But unfortunately, bad behavior from many tourists who have visited Spain and Barcelona in particular have really turned locals off to tourists in general. Though Spain has been a warm and wonderful host to people from all over the world, some of these guests have not returned the favor, adding to the annoyance and building tension. For instance, locals often complain about tourists aggressively staking out prime beach locations very early in the day. Tourists will often arrive before dawn to claim their territory at the local beaches. They stake out the area with towels, chairs, and even inflatable pools, leaving very little room for residents and other people who visit throughout the day. Noise pollution is also another common annoyance for places who have a heavy tourism industry. Obviously, when people come to Spain, they want to enjoy the city's vibrant nightlife, and locals do too. But while some noise is expected, excessive noise, especially late into the night, can be very disturbing for residents and other tourists who just want to get some sleep. Also, tourists who have not taken the time to verse themselves with local customs and traditions can often come off as quite disrespectful. For instance, not dressing modestly or appropriate at certain religious sites, or not observing and respecting the hours of siesta, which is traditional to Spanish culture. All of these things probably seem like small annoyances, but when they happen over and over again, especially from the same people from the same countries, this starts to build up a resentment against certain groups of tourists. Two especially notorious incidences were ignited by the combination of the tourism industry and social media. There's an idyllic spot for a selfie in front of Sagrada Familia at the exit of the metro station. But people were propping up their phone in weird places, which put their phone at risk of theft and just completely overcrowded the area, making pedestrian life impossible. Therefore, authorities actually had to place a selfie ban in this specific area to mitigate the chaos. Another group of tourists was caught on camera climbing the still-in-progress facade of Sagrada Familia. How did they get caught on camera, you might be wondering? Well, it's because they filmed themselves breaking into Sagrada Familia after hours and climbing the facade, and then posted it to YouTube. Once again, people incriminating themselves by filming themselves doing things that are illegal. I don't understand. Incidents like these highlight tourists' disrespect for the place that they're going and make locals not want to share their beautiful home with any outsiders. And honestly, who can blame them? I admire the protesters' effort to conserve their city and protect their right to live there. Though the water guns have been aimed at these particular tourists and the signs are telling them to go home, overall, I don't think that most tourists are the issue. The biggest issue is the ones who have decided that the rules don't apply to them and have decided to be poor guests in a foreign country. And it is very true that a few can ruin it for the many. As travelers and tourists, I think it's really important that we observe these protesters and listen to what they have to say. This can help us be better guests and visitors when we go to foreign places. We must always remember that we are just that, guests. This is not our home or our country, and it is important to respect the laws, cultures, and traditions of the places that we're going to. The world is not a photo studio, but rather a place where other people live, work, and go about their lives. If we keep an attitude of respect and learning when we're going on these trips, we're much more likely to not only have a good time, but also to learn something new and be welcomed back to those places. I hope that Barcelona and its residents can enjoy a much more well-balanced future with tourism. Thank you so much for examining this topic of over-tourism in reference to the protests that are going on in Barcelona. I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions on over-tourism, the protests happening in Barcelona, and maybe experiences that you've had with some rude tourists in your hometown. Please feel free to share your stories, thoughts, and opinions in the comments below. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and until next time, keep wandering.